Imagine having a flower garden that once planted and established, you would hardly ever have to water. Only in the most severe drought situations would you ever have to water. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. In this video, I want to share with you 10 flowers that are extremely drought tolerant that can help you be a better gardener. Perhaps my favorite drought tolerant flower is this one here in front of me. This is Black-Eyed Susan. This particular cultivar is Goldstrom. It gets 18 to 24 inches tall. It has these 3 to 4 inch diameter flowers on them. For me here in zone 8A, they're going to start to bloom around the first part of June, and they'll bloom through Labor Day weekend for me. I'm right now, very early August, they're in mid-bloom right now. They're going to continue to bloom for another month. USDA zones 3 through 10, so we can grow these all the way from the Gulf Coast up to Wisconsin, Minnesota. There's a lot of areas that you can grow Black-Eyed Susan. Now it prefers a medium moistured soil, but it can tolerate a lot of drought. This is a very drought tolerant plant. Great for full sun situations. This is one of the plants that you can stick in the ground and forget about. This is a native to a lot of areas that it grows in here in the eastern United States. So you can walk out into a field or in the forest somewhere and you'll see little patches of Black-Eyed Susans growing. This is a plant that's not a perennial for me here in zone 8A, but it is self-seeding, meaning that these flower heads are going to produce seeds, they're going to fall to the ground, and these flowers will come back the next year. These are zinnias. So zinnias are native to the southwest United States. So right there, that should tell you that they're going to be extremely drought tolerant. If they can survive the desert southwest of the United States, they can survive pretty much anywhere. USDA zones 2 through 11 for an annual, but some areas can also grow these as a perennial. If you're in zones 4 through 9, sometimes these will come back from the root. It just depends on the cultivar that you're growing. Here for me in zone 8A, I get some of these that pop back up every year, some don't, but most of them will come back from seed. These are going to get 18 to 24 inches tall with about a 3 to 4 inch diameter flower. Now the flower colors vary a lot. I love this because you get a mix of colors. You can see here we have lavenders, we have oranges, we have pinks, we have yellows, we have whites, just a myriad of colors here, and the pollinators love zinnia. If you're looking for a flower that's drought tolerant, can take full sun, and is going to attract a lot of butterflies, a lot of bees, look at zinnia. This is Salvia May Night. So May Night is going to be a perennial for me here in zone 8A. You can grow this in zones 4 through 9 in the United States as a perennial. As the name suggests, in the month of May, it gets a prolific purplish flower that grows all the way across the top of this, so much flowers that you can barely see the green vegetative leaves underneath them. Now throughout the summer, we're still going to get purplish flowers, and I'll continue to get flowers on this all the way to first frost, which for me is going to be sometime in late October to early November. So this one's going to bloom for me all summer. You can see here the pollinators love it. There's some bees and butterflies flying around here. Doesn't get as tall, could almost be a ground cover. Technically, we could probably classify this as a ground cover. It gets 12 to 18 inches tall. These tallest spikes here probably right at 18 inches, but it gets wider than it does tall. This particular one's probably almost 3 feet in diameter. So it gets way wider than it does tall. One other thing I should mention about salvia is that it's actually fragrant. So you could take some vegetation, some stems off of this, muddle it, and leave it in like a bathroom. It has a nice aroma to it. Just something to keep in mind, an added benefit to this beautiful flower, salvia. So if you're looking for a ground cover that can take full sun and is drought tolerant, and you need to add some purplish flowers to your garden, look into Salvia May Night. Tucked in just behind our salvia here is a plant that's vitally important to the monarch butterflies. They cannot complete their life cycle without it, and that's why I have it tucked in here with my other perennials. So this is a big pollinator garden. This is milkweed. So milkweed can get really tall. It can get up to 5 feet tall. I have some specimens here in my perennial garden that are around 3 feet tall, but they'll put on these orangish flowers beginning in June, and they flower for me throughout July and August and into September. These can be found all over North America. So from zone 3 all the way down to zone 10, they're found in the eastern part of the United States. They're found in the Great Plains. The Native Americans out in Nebraska, the Omaha Indians, used to use this for medicinal purposes. So this is found throughout Nebraska, Oklahoma, that far west, and then all the way to the East Coast as well. If you're looking for a plant that's going to benefit the monarch butterflies, add some awesome contrast. You get the orange flower with the purple flower here with the salvia that you see here. Look into milkweed. These do not look like much right now because they are on the tail end of their bloom cycle. We have one flower remaining here that has a little bit of color to it, and that's it. So these are going to bloom for me starting at really about late April, early May here in zone 8A, and then they fade out around the 4th of July, and then we get these beautiful seed heads here. We'll talk about these more in a minute, but this is echinacea. You can find it from the East Coast all the way to mid-continent. I believe there's even some species that grow in and around the Rockies. So this is a great native drought-tolerant plant. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of cultivars of echinacea. Some of them not getting much more than 12 to 18 inches tall. For example, there's a cultivar called Echinacea powwow that's more of a dwarf. These here, I've grown from seed myself, and they can get in the 4 to 5 foot range. Right now, they're about 5 foot tall. I don't deadhead my echinacea, and the reason being is these seed heads. So in the fall, the birds, in particular the American golden finch, they will come in here and pick the seed heads off of the top of the echinacea. So as the birds begin to migrate south for the winter, my backyard over the past 5 to 10 years, as I've implemented this perennial garden, has become a stop for those birds. So not only do our drought-tolerant plants help our pollinators, we're also helping the birds with these flowers as well. This is a non-native plant for me. It was brought over to the United States for its obvious ornamental purposes. This is lantana. This is another one that has hundreds of cultivars available. This particular cultivar, I believe, is Miss Huff. This is a perennial for me here in zone 8A. It's one of the only perennial lantanas that I have in my area. It's one of the more cold hardy lantanas. This particular cultivar can get in the 3 to 4 foot tall range. Some of the other ones are more like ground covers. They only get 6 to 12 inches tall, but they may get 4 or 5 feet wide, so they make excellent ground covers. But it is extremely drought tolerant. This is one of those plants you can pretty much stick in the ground, water it for a week or two, let those roots get established, and just leave it alone. I haven't watered this one at all the entire summer. Here again, we're in early August, and you can see how beautiful this is. It's going to start blooming for me in zone 8A in June, and it's going to continue to bloom till I get a frost in late October or early November, and at that point it will die back. This is also a great pollinator attractor. You can see here there's tons of bees and moths and butterflies on this plant right now. So this is another plant, if you're looking for drought tolerance as well as pollinator capability, look into lantana. I would caution our friends in Florida and in the desert Southwest, this can be invasive in your area, meaning that it's going to escape captivity. It's going to be like kudzu or privet here in my area where we find it in the woods and it's not supposed to be there. Here in zone 8A where I'm at, lantana is not invasive. It produces seeds, but the seeds are non-viable. We just get too cold in the wintertime for them to produce. And so we don't have to worry about that. But if you live in some of those areas where lantana may be invasive, you may want to steer clear of this plant. Another non-native for me that is an excellent perennial is Russian sage. This is also extremely cold hardy. So if you're watching this and you live in Canada or you live in like Norway or Sweden, you can probably grow this because on the USDA hardiness map, it's hardy all the way to zone 2, which is really far north. But it also does very well in zone 8, zone 9. It does well in those more temperate climates as well. Here again, there's a lot of different cultivars that are grown of Russian sage. There's some that get taller than they do wide. There's some that get wider than they do tall. This particular one gets about 3 feet tall, which is average. I've seen some get 5 feet tall, but they all have some similar characteristics. So they all have this purplish flower. This flower starts for me about midsummer. So I'm gonna say like mid to late June, we start to see some really good flowering, and it's going to flower for me all the way into October. This is another pollinator attractor, so there's lots of bees and butterflies that come around this. An interesting thing about Russian sage, just like with salvia, it's very fragrant. You can take this, you can muddle it up and put it in the house, and it gives a nice aroma to the house. This is Shasta daisy. Shasta daisy is not native to anywhere. The reason being is it was developed by horticulturalists. They crossed two flowers together, got offspring from it, and then crossed another flower with the offspring to develop Shasta daisy. So you're not going to walk around in the woods and find native Shasta daisies anywhere. Interesting fact about Shasta daisy, the name Shasta daisy comes from Mount Shasta in California because the developers thought that the petals reminded them of the snow. It's the same color as the snow on Mount Shasta, so hence the name Shasta daisy. But it does have this unique yellow center with the white petals. This particular cultivar is Becky, and Becky gets about 2.5 to 3 feet tall. Some cultivars can get in the 4 to 5 foot range, but this one will start to bloom for me in late April, early May, and I get a really hard initial flush. The tops of these, you can see the spent flower heads here, just hundreds of flowers, and then throughout the summer I get some sporadic ones. So what I do, a tip here for you is once you get that initial flush and they've kind of faded out, prune the tops of them out, rake out these spent heads, and then it'll rebloom. So I don't cut all the heads off on these. I cut about half of them off, and then I leave the other halves. The reason being is the birds will actually come feed off the seed heads here. So I try to leave some of them up for the birds to eat. But I do like the fact that we can make this rebloom again. So I'll come through and sporadically remove some of these, and I'll get these secondary blooms that are coming up in August. USDA zones 5 through 9, so not near as cold hardy as some of the other drought tolerant plants that we've looked at, but this is another one that you can stick in the ground and forget about. It also spreads a little bit. This is an excellent ground cover, so if you're having erosion control issues, it's a full sun area that usually stays very dry, but if you get a big rain, you may get a lot of water rushing through there. Look into Shasta daisy. It may also help you control some of those erosion issues. I felt like this deserves some recognition because it is one of the most drought tolerant plants that I have on my property. This is zebra grass. So zebra grass will go dormant in the winter, and then in the spring we'll get the green shoots to come up. And the unique thing about the shoots is that they're variegated. So you get this alternating green, white, green, white, green, white going up the grass blades. And then as we get into August, we get this plumage as well. This plumage could get in the 5 to 6 foot range. I'm right at 6 foot, 6'1", and you can see some of the plumes are a little bit taller than I am. And these plumes will stay on here and look really good throughout the fall. Once we get into the middle of winter, say around December, January time frame, I'll come in here and I'll just cut this off about knee height, and then they come back next year. I never have to water these, and we get this beautiful plumage. When other plants are starting to fade out, our flowers are fading into the fall, this is in full display. So this is just something to keep in mind for those drought tolerant plants that you're looking for. I wanted to save my most drought tolerant plant for last. This is sedum. It has a very waxy leaf. It holds in water very well. This is a plant, you don't get water for months and months, that is going to be okay. This particular cultivar is Autumn Joy. As the name suggests, it's going to bloom in autumn. So right now we're in middle August. You can see that there's starting to be some flower buds set. This is going to open up in September, be in full bloom for me in October, and it has like a rusty red colored flower. Very, very pretty. The pollinators love, 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 love this plant. So as all the other plants are fading out, this one's coming on and they rush to this plant. Before I came up here to film, there were several butterflies already on top of this, but as I approached the plant, they flew away. So even here in August, and the flowers aren't fully open, they're already feeding on this. This is a great plant for drought situations. Gets about 3 feet tall, so it's about waist tall on me, so it's right around the 3 feet range, and it'll die back all the way to the ground. USDA zones 5 through 9 on sedum. If you have flowers in your yard that we did not go over in this video that are extremely drought tolerant, please share those with us down in the comments below. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor, and until next time, happy gardening.